Hello and welcome back to ASMR Spooks. Today's video is going to be a bit different. A lot of you have requested for me to try doing some more soft-spoken ASMR style videos instead of the usual whispering that I'm generally doing in most of my videos. So today, I'm going to be reading all of these scary, creepy Reddit subscriber stories that I found online in a more soft-spoken tone for you guys. I truly hope you guys enjoy this style video, as it was highly requested from all of you that are following this channel, whom I love dearly. I will still be doing whispering videos too on this channel, but I think I'm going to switch it up between uploading a whisper style spooky story video and a soft spoken spooky story video, so that way you guys have all of these different variations and selections to choose from. So yeah, I hope you guys really enjoy this video. Don't forget to give this video a like and comment or subscribe if you can. You guys have all become my YouTube family and you all are so greatly appreciated to me. Anyways, without further ado, let's jump right in to some incredibly haunting stories that will surely keep you up at night. Story number 1. My mom used to clean houses. She quit, however, after this. In the mid-'80s, my mom was a house cleaner in Australia. She would clean houses in suburban areas and would sometimes do houses in rural/wine regions. She would leave business cards at the local shops, and that's how she got most of her business. However, she also got business through referrals and word of mouth. One day, she got a call from a lady who sounded around 60 years old. She was asking Mom to come and clean her old farmhouse. Now, she made a lot of odd demands, and Mom would usually meet clients before taking on new business, but in this case, the lady did not want to meet Mom and said she would leave the keys under the front doormat. Mom agreed, mainly because the lady was quite obviously very wealthy and was offering to pay Mom substantially more than she would reasonably expect. Mom went to the house on a Monday morning and said as soon as she pulled up, she had already felt unnerved by the long driveway. The house was essentially in the middle of a very large and very empty property. She found the keys under the doormat and began cleaning. About an hour into the clean, she hears the back door shut. Now, Mom was told no one would be at the house, so she immediately felt unsafe. She stood frozen in the kitchen for what she said felt like 3 to 4 minutes, although she said it could have been much longer. She looked out the front window, and there were no other cars on the property. She wanted to leave immediately, but knew she had 2 rooms left to do. Both were bedrooms. She said as time passed and she heard nothing else, she decided that perhaps it was nothing, or perhaps something had fallen and it wasn't the door after all. She walked up the hallway and stepped into the back bedroom. All over the bed were black and white photos. As Mom got closer, she began to realize that the photos were all of her. Some were taken at our family home, and many others were taken at other houses that Mom would clean. Some were through windows and even over fences. She used the house phone to call the police and immediately drove to the end of the driveway. The lady ended up being investigated, but continued to claim that it was a break-in. After some time, the police stopped with their searching, and we ended up moving into a new town 4 months later. Every time Mom tells these stories, I get serious chills. To this day, Mom thinks the lady had something to do with it, but why and for what purpose? Any theories? Story number 2. Pulled over by weird cop. So this was right after 9/11 happened. For reference, I'm a female and 24 years old. I was driving by myself across country to get my son who was with my ex. I had been out of the state taking care of a sick family member. Now it was the middle of the night in New Mexico, and all of a sudden, I saw police lights pull behind me. I was exhausted and annoyed because I hadn't been speeding or doing anything wrong. There were not really any other cars on the road at that time, and as I was close to the exit for the hotel I had planned to stop at for the night, I decided to pull over. I pulled over, and the cop came over to the driver's side window, which in itself was weird because usually they came to the passenger window on busy roads, and this was a highway. So I gave him all my stuff, and he kind of just stared at me for the longest time. He then walked to his car and then returned almost immediately. He told me to step outside the car. Okay, so I began to worry at this point because I had gotten tickets before, but being asked to step outside of the car was not normal. I did as he said, and he asked if I had been drinking. I said I hadn't, and then I asked why he pulled me over. He said I was driving erratic, which was not true. He then asked me if I was a terrorist, which was absolutely absurd. I was a young American white woman just driving, so there was really no need for this question. It was weird, and I was also a veteran with an ID also. He gave me a walk-the-line drunk driving test, which I passed, and then said he needed to search my car to see if I had drugs. Now, I thought about this for a minute because I knew my rights and all, but it was so late and I was just so extremely tired. I just didn't want to deal with all of the BS of refusing, so I gave him the okay because I knew I did not have anything in my car. So when he got to my truck, he opened up the back and found a small suitcase that I had that had all of my dancer stripper stuff. He asked me about it, and I told him I was a stripper. This really set him off, and he started screaming at me about being a trash person. This pissed me off, and I started to look around at my situation. I was alone for the most part with this weird guy, and every once in a while a car would pass by, but for the most part the roads were empty. It was the middle of the night, and I didn't have anything on myself to protect myself, and I knew he had a gun. He told me then that I needed to walk back into the tree line that was next to the road. I stared at him and said no. I demanded he call for backup and that other officers come. He was then thrown off by this. I said I wanted a female officer and that I would no longer comply with anything he said, and then I began waving down cars when they actually did pass by. He told me to calm down, wrote out a speeding ticket, and let me go. I never paid the ticket and have never heard a word about it since. Now, this was 20 years ago. At the time, I was really shaken and I just kind of forgot about it, but now looking back, I don't think he was a real cop. Story number 3, The Man in My Yard. This will be a bit short, but it's all completely true. I grew up in a small town in British Columbia, Canada. There's around 7,000 people in this town, and I grew up with my mom. The town I grew up in is in a small area above the border, and it's heavily wooded on the outskirts of the city. We lived in my grandma's house until my mom could afford to get our own place. That was at around the age of 7. I remember one night the phone rang. I answered and said, "Hello?" To which I didn't hear anything, so I hung up. Then another ring. This time when I answered it, I could hear creepy giggling on the other end. This creeped the hell out of me. I gave the phone to my mom and she just told me to go upstairs. Every so often for a few years after, this would happen. The giggling and random calls with no one on the other end. I usually would just try to forget about it, but sometimes I felt extremely unnerved. By the time I was 10, we had moved to a few different places in town, and I can't remember if it happened there or not, so I'm assuming that it didn't. One night, I was watching TV before bed, and the phone rang. I answered to someone on the other end saying my name in a weird whisper. I ran out of the room and began screaming and crying. My mom answered, and I can remember her saying, "Okay, you need to stop this right now." I can't quite remember what happened after, and all I can remember now is going back to sleep. That night, I woke up to tapping on my window. I remember being too scared to move, and through the small crack in my window, I heard the whisper again, saying my name, Maddie. I completely freaked out. I took a few seconds, which felt like hours, to muster up the strength to run to my mom. She said I was having a bad dream until she checked out my room and immediately called the cops. The police showed up and caught a man hiding in the thick tree lining in my yard. My mom, after that, had to have a huge talk with me and explain to me that this man is my biological father and is mentally disturbed. The calls stopped for a few years, but have happened since only a handful of times. I am now 18, and honestly, they don't disturb me as much as they used to. But to my creepy biological dad, I will hurt you if you come near me in the future. Story number 4. Pay attention to the crowd. This took place in San Francisco in the early 90s. I was 33, a female, and living alone in the big city. I had a good job and I was very interested in real estate. I decided to walk to a neighborhood grocery store to pick up a real estate magazine. I mean, that's what you did back then. We didn't really have the internet quite yet. It was a rare, warm evening in SF. There were quite a few people walking around outside. I was walking behind a group of about 5 or 6 apparently unrelated people. At least they weren't talking to each other, so that's what I assumed. I am rather short, so all I could see pretty much was their backs. Suddenly, without a single word from any of them, they all turned around and started walking back in the direction we had just come from. I was a bit amazed by this and turned to look at them, but sort of shrugged it off and kept going in my original direction. As I turned my head, I was stunned to see a man just in front of me pointing a gun at me and grinning like a madman. He was about my height, wearing those green mechanics' overalls. He was also covered head to toe in grease and dirt. Startled, I was about 2 feet from him, and my only gut reaction was just to continue going forward. So I passed him, and every muscle in my body tensed up. My heart began racing, and I just kept walking. To my dismay, I heard his footsteps following me. Then he began whispering, "Oh, you're a bad bitch, huh? Why don't you run then, bitch? Run!" At that moment, my mind seized on the belief that he was waiting for me to run before he shot me in the back. He seemed to want it so badly, so I was determined to do just the opposite. I kept walking forward, expecting to feel a bullet slam into my spine at any given moment. That shot never came, and I believe then and now that if I did decide to run, that would have given him the piece of his fantasy that he needed, if that makes sense. Anyway, I headed up a hill and around a corner to the gas station with people in it. It was dark already, and when I turned around, he was gone.